I pulled a quote from your book to start the housing conversation. Dipping into your super to buy a home, the federal government buying part of the property, first-time buyer grants, property tax concession, whatever idea gets chipped up next, they all seek to make it easier for buyers to afford the expensive thing rather than make it more affordable. That just adds to prices. And I think in that paragraph you summed up what Bryce and my frustration with all this is. So talk to us about this problem of demand-side policies.
Yeah, so look, it is frustrating. And it's also entirely understandable from a political perspective, which is why it gets even more frustrating, because they just want to talk about supply. They want to throw this idea of supply at the housing issue as a sort of a blanket solution. And when I say they, I mean any government. Yeah. I mean, it's really not. This is not a party issue. You ask anyone, that's the one they want to talk about, because they've been shown enough times that once you start tweaking with demand side policies, you lose elections. There are too many people. Whether it's kind of that usual calculation of about a third of Australians are renters, and 2/3 of Australian adults are either paying off a mortgage or own their house outright or home outright. That, I think, it sort of sums it up. You don't want to mess around with negative gearing or capital gains tax exemptions. You don't really want to do anything that's going to stall or, heaven forbid, drive down property prices. And so they talk about supply. And that, I mean, unfortunately, it's lip service, because you're not going to hit your supply targets. The supply targets that you talk about aren't necessarily going to change the equation dramatically anyway. And then what you do is you sort of say that people can use other kinds of their money, whether it's superannuation or you can get an exemption on stamp duty or this sort of stuff, which, I mean, of course it's going to drive up prices. I mean, everybody knows that. Yeah. Like, it's a frustrating thing to kind of have to look at all the time, and you hope that you're going to see a big legislative idea come through, but that's never going to happen. Come on.
Well, let's put you on the spot. You know, you said if you were Prime Minister for a day, you'd get everyone to delete their gambling apps. If you were Prime Minister for a day, how would you tackle house prices? You might need more than a day.
No, you wouldn't. You definitely need more than a day. You'd need a couple of decades. But for me, and I talk about this in the section on tolls, actually, the tolls chapter for me is actually a housing chapter. It's the fourth hidden housing chapter in the book, because for me, housing comes down to the movement of people. Like we saw during COVID, the willingness for Australians to leave the capital cities, just get out of there, head for the beach, head for the country, buy a larger property, something that really suits them and that they love. And there was a lot of enjoyment. There was this exodus out of the capital cities, not just one or two, but a lot of them. And then what happened was COVID sort of ended, lockdowns ended, and large businesses decided that they did need people to come back into the office at least a few days a week. And so it became kind of untenable to be able to live there when you still had to be at your desk, even 2 days a week, 8:30, 9 in the morning. And so I kind of started looking at it as it's really about the transport. If you can make it doable to, I'm from Melbourne, let's say that you wanted to live in Bendigo and get into Melbourne in, let's say, 45 minutes or an hour instead of an hour and a half, 2 hours. Well, all of a sudden you change that whole equation in the head. You can live there and get in. And these are places that are established. They've got established properties, established infrastructure, schools, hospitals, things like that that could probably support more people and more construction. And this exists in other capital cities as well. I just think it's got to be about the flow of people. So with that in mind, I mean, if I were in charge for a day, knowing that it wasn't going to do anything in the short term, I'd be trying to set in place some faster rail.
Nice.
These are expensive, incredibly expensive projects. Let me just put that out.
Yeah,
I don't know where we get the money, but if there was a way, I mean, a lot of the policies that we're talking about now are still billions of dollars. If you sort of made it a federal approach to making housing more affordable that doesn't drive down necessarily prices in capital cities, but rather sends them up in other parts of the country, and you're presenting this as a federal, opportunity. Well, I just think that would be something that I'd need to hear. I'd need to see in the comments of this why I'm so wrong.
Yeah. Well, let him know in the comments.
Please. I may be way off. My pricing may be astronomical. It cost $1 trillion bajillion.
Well, we got we got a sign off on the feasibility of a Sydney to Newcastle high-speed rail link last week, but that won't be built until 2039. and that's not assuming any delays. So
Yeah, and look, I mean, high speed rail and fast rail are kind of different things. Like, high speed rail in Japan's going 300 k's an hour, more.
Yeah.
I mean, fast rail doesn't need to go that fast. It just
yeah.
needs to go faster than our plodding trains that we've got now. You know what I mean? Like, and look, I say it with a small understanding of just how complicated and expensive that would be. But my goodness, what an impact it would have.
Yeah. No, I like that. I think any different solution is a good solution because we certainly need it. It's funny you say the political calculus of, a third of Australians rent, a third own their own home outright, and a third are paying off a mortgage. Rough.
Rough, yeah.
But, so 2/3 are sort of tied to the house price, like have incentives to keep house prices going up.
Yep.
Whereas Australians, every working Australian has superannuation that's largely invested in the stock market.
Yep.
Imagine if the same political incentives were tied to the stock market falling 20%, and all of a sudden you had governments coming out with first stock buyer grants and, deposits to get more leverage to buy stocks.
True.
And they're like, just imagine, it would
True.
it would be so good for equity mates.
Oh my God, yeah. Imagine. Imagine the boom. Yeah. I mean, yeah. That's an interesting thought.
Yeah. Probably not something we want. No.
Well, I mean, it'd drive things up.
Yeah.
I will say this about investing. Everything you do learn is cumulative. What I learned at 20 is useful.
Equity.